Is it possible that who you think you are, well, that it isn't the full picture?
Maybe that you're thinking itself. What if that's actually creating everything you experience?
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into a source you brought us, a pretty unique one, Thinking and Destiny by Harold W. Percival.
Yeah, this isn't your typical philosophy book. It lays out this whole intricate system, about us, the universe, the laws connecting everything.
And especially that link between thinking and, well, what happens in life and even after.
It's definitely dense. A lot of ideas that might feel pretty unfamiliar.
So think of us as guides today. We're going to try and navigate this landscape together, pull out the key concepts, the really surprising bits, make it make sense.
You kind of have to set aside some usual assumptions, maybe. Look at a different map of reality.
Absolutely. So let's dive in.
Okay.
All right, so where do we start with this? According to the source, it's not the body, not the outside world, but understanding the self first.
Exactly. And it introduces this idea right away of the triune self. It calls it an indivisible unit, a trinity.
A trinity, meaning three parts.
Yeah, three distinct parts, but inseparable. There's a knower part, a thinker part, and a doer part.
Knower, thinker, doer.
Okay.
And it makes a point that only some of the doer part is actually here in the body.
Right, a critical point. Only a portion of the doer part comes into the physical body.
And that part is called the doer in the body. That's the bit experiencing things through the senses right now.
Precisely. That's the aspect of you currently, inhabiting this physical form.
So if that's just a fraction, where's the rest? The thinker, the knower, the remainder of the doer.
According to the system, they're in what it calls the eternal, the realm of permanence.
Okay.
And the issue for the doer in the body is that it gets completely caught up in the senses, so focused on the physical that it's usually just unconscious of its own higher parts. The thinker and knower are still there, still present, but the doer in the body doesn't typically feel them directly.
Ah, okay, so it feels something, like a presence, but misunderstands it.
That's the idea. It feels this connection to its complete triune self, but because it's so absorbed by the senses, especially in what the source calls these sensuous stages, it looks for the source outside.
Right. Instead of looking within, it searches out in nature, trying to find its God or its source out there.
Exactly that. The physical world just becomes this overwhelming distraction from its true nature.
Which leads us, I think, straight into the core mechanism here, the law of thought.
This is really central. The fundamental claim is that you personally are the maker of your own destiny, and the tool you use, it's your thinking.
Thinking isn't just passive, it's active, creative.
Very much so. The source goes even further, describing thoughts almost as living beings.
Living beings.
Yeah. They exist, they cycle around in your personal mental atmosphere, and they possess this inherent drive to exteriorize.
It's become real, basically.
To manifest physically. They push towards becoming your actions, the objects you find, the events that occur around you. The thought itself seems to carry this potential, this balancing factor, pushing it towards expression unless it's dealt with internally.
So does that mean even things we think of as pure chance, like an accident?
Yeah.
That's also thought exteriorizing?
It does claim that, yes. And that's definitely one of the more counterintuitive aspects. The idea is you have countless thoughts cycling constantly.
Okay.
An accident happens when the cycle of one of your thoughts happens to align, to coincide with the cycle of another person's thought.
Yeah.
And that coincidence creates the perfect storm, the conditions for those thoughts to precipitate into a physical event, even if neither person consciously willed that specific outcome.
Wow. Okay, that completely reframes things like coincidence or fate. It's like unseen thought currents interacting.
That's the picture it paints. And it also talks about different kinds of thinking, doesn't it?
It does. There's real thinking that belongs to the thinker part of the triune self.
Right, the higher part.
And then there's human thinking, which is, well, what most of us do most of the time.
Yeah, our everyday active or passive thoughts, mostly about physical things, right? And this often uses what the source calls the doer's three minds: the body mind, feeling mind, desire mind.
So human thinking uses these minds tied to the doer in the body, while real thinking is from that higher thinker aspect. What if you create a thought?
Yeah.
Can you stop it? Can you pull it back before it exteriorizes?
The source says, yes, you can, before it becomes an act or event.
How?
If your aim changes, perhaps. Or, importantly, if the doer part itself, the conscious part in you, disapproves of the thought's purpose after it's been generated.
So if you realize, oh, I don't actually want that.
Kind of. If the doer actively refuses to let it manifest, the thought loses its power and just dissipates. It won't exteriorize.
Okay. And what about balancing a thought? That sounds crucial for dealing with this destiny creation stuff.
It really is. A thought gets balanced or resolved, taken out of the destiny cycle when the person performs some related duty.
A duty.
Yes, but specifically, willingly and intelligently, and without attachment to the result.
Without attachment. That's key.
Absolutely. And the really interesting bit is you might not even consciously know which thought you're balancing by doing that duty. The act itself, done in that spirit, willing, smart, detached, fulfills the thought's need for balance.
That's quite
And-
something. So selfless mindful action is the way to clear these thought patterns. And our general attitude matters too, our mental state.
Definitely. Your overall mental attitude is described as creating the soil in your mental atmosphere. It makes you more receptive to certain kinds of thoughts or helps others take root and grow. It shapes what future thoughts you're likely to encounter or generate.
Okay, so we've got the triune self, the doer in the body, thinking, creating destiny. Let's shift to the physical body itself. The Source has a specific take on that and something called the breath form.
Right. The physical body. It's described pretty bluntly, actually, as a nature machine or just a machine.
We're a machine, not really us.
Not the permanent unit. No, it's seen as this constantly shifting collection of nature matter, temporary.
Okay, and working with this machine is the breath form. What's that?
Ah, the breath form. Very important concept here. It's called the living soul. It's the active pattern or force that creates, builds, and maintains the physical body.
So it's like the blueprint and the life force combined.
In a way, yes. And its state, its form, is directly linked to the doer's feeling and desire. The doer operates through the breath form to interact with nature and control the body machine.
So the breath form mediates between the inner doer and the outer physical world.
You could say that. And here's another layer. The breath form carries signatures, impressions from your past thinking and feeling.
Like a record.
Kind of like an energetic record, yeah.
No.
And these signatures attract things. Specifically, they attract elementals.
Elementals. You
Mm.
mentioned those with accidents. They're nature units.
Yes, the Source describes them as basic nature units doing all the work of nature. They become what we experience as sensations when our feeling and desire touch them, energize them.
Okay.
And the signatures on your breath form, they attract the specific elementals needed to build the physical conditions that match those signatures.
So health, disease, wealth, poverty. These arise because the breath form signatures attract the right elementals to construct that reality.
That's the mechanism described. The breath form is essentially carrying the template for your physical destiny, encoded by past thoughts and feelings, and it draws in the nature forces to make it physically manifest.
That's a complex interplay. And the Source also mentioned something about disconnecting from the senses through the doer.
Yeah, a pretty radical idea, that it's possible through really focused thinking for the doer to consciously detach its awareness from the body's sensory nerves.
Which could allow for, what? Surgery without pain, maybe?
The Source suggests that level of detachment and control is achievable. It's about the doer becoming conscious as itself, separate from the machine and its inputs.
Fascinating. Okay, so from the physical, the Source then goes into what happens after the physical. Psychic destiny, the after-death journey.
Right. It talks about 6 classes of psychic destiny that come from thinking. The most important one is character, your virtues, vices, your basic disposition.
And the 6th class is specifically about the after-death states.
Exactly. What the doer portion goes through once the physical body dies.
So what does happen right after death, according to the Source?
It describes a separation process. All the different components that made up the living human start to, well, dissociate. The physical body gives its matter back to the elements.
And the doer.
The doer portion, the part that was in the body, leaves, and it takes the breath form with it initially.
And then this doer plus breath form goes through a series of stages.
12 distinct stages, yes. The book even has a diagram illustrating this journey through post-mortem states.
And this includes experiences that sound like, well, like hell and heaven.
It uses terms that correspond to those ideas, but defines them very particularly. Hell isn't a place so much as a state.
A state of what?
Of reliving intensely all the past feelings, desires, and thoughts that weren't balanced out during life. It's described as being composed of elementals, which the doer perceives as vivid, often painful scenes. The Source specifically says it's a state made by desires.
So it's processing unresolved emotional energy. And heaven.
Similar idea, but for the positive side. It's a state of experiencing past hopes, aspirations, good deeds that didn't fully manifest on Earth. A period of happiness generated by the more positive thoughts and actions.
Okay, experiencing the results. But here's the bit that really stood out for me.
Ah, yes. The source is very clear. Nothing new is learned in either hell or heaven.
Nothing new. That feels quite different from many traditions.
Radically different. It insists that Earth life, where all these different levels, physical, form, life, light, intersect, is the only classroom. The after-death states are purely for experiencing consequences, burning off or enjoying generated energies. No actual learning or progress happens there.
So all the work has to be done here during life. What about judgment? Is there a judgment day?
There's a stage called judgment. It's described as the point where the doer portion becomes directly aware of the conscious light of intelligence.
The conscious light.
Yes. This light is aware of absolutely everything the doer has ever thought or done. Its sheer presence forces the doer to see itself, its entire past, completely honestly. No filters, no excuses.
Like looking in a perfect mirror of truth. And the breath form. It doesn't stay with the doer through all this.
No. After the hell period, but before the heaven period begins, the doer portion starts to separate from the breath form. The breath form holds those life memories, those impressions, and the doer needs to detach before moving on.
And after heaven. Is it back to earth? Re-existence.
Yes, re-existence is the term used. The doer portion, having completed its cycle, eventually re-embodies.
And there was that interesting detail about sex.
Right. The source states the doer itself, the core consciousness, has no sex. But the complete doer is made of 12 portions. 6 are called desire portions, and they successively inhabit male bodies. The other 6 are feeling portions, and they successively inhabit female bodies.
That's a very specific model.
Yeah.
So why don't we remember any of this? The past lives, the after-death stuff.
It comes down to different kinds of memory. There's sense memory, which is tied to the physical brain and the breath form during one life. That gets wiped clean after death when the breath form eventually dissolves.
Right.
Our normal waking consciousness is hooked into that temporary sense memory. But there's also doer memory, the record of the doer's own experiences across all lives. That persists, but our ordinary sense-focused awareness in the body usually can't tap into it.
It sounds like so much depends on what we're conscious as, which brings us to the I. Who is the I?
The source draws a really sharp line here. It says that what we usually identify as I, our feelings, desires, thoughts, personality, body sensations, that's the false I.
The false I. Because it's temporary, changing stuff, not the real core.
Exactly. The doer portion, the conscious part in the body, does feel the presence of the real I.
Which is?
The knower part of the triune self. That's the true, permanent I. But the doer is caught in an illusion, identifying with its own feelings and desires instead. The source claims this illusion comes from a very old, deep thought created by desire itself. Desire wanting desperately to be the I.
So that inner voice saying, I want this or I feel that, isn't the ultimate I, it's the doer, the false I, caught up in its own states.
That's the distinction the source makes. But, and this is crucial, it also says you can change this. You can become conscious as the doer portion itself and even connect consciously with the thinker and knower parts while still embodied.
How do you do that? How do you shift that identity?
Through intentional focus of feeling and thinking. To become conscious as the doer, you intensely feel and think about feeling and desire itself. To connect with the thinker, you focus feeling and thinking on rightness and reason. And for the knower, the real I, you focus on I-ness and selfness. It all depends, the source says, on what you genuinely desire to focus on, what you actively turn your awareness towards.
So conscious effort, specific kinds of inner focus, can shift your center of awareness upwards within your own triune self.
That's the path described.
And then, beyond even the triune self, there's this ultimate reality, consciousness, with a capital C.
Yes. This is presented as the final absolute ground of everything, the mystery of all mysteries. Fundamentally, it's beyond our ability to grasp.
What is it then?
It's described as the presence, everywhere, by which all things are conscious. Everything is conscious because of this presence, each thing in its own way or degree.
But consciousness itself, it doesn't do anything. It just is.
According to the source, yes, it performs no function, doesn't act, doesn't change. It's not caused by anything. It doesn't have properties we can pin down. It's just there. The fundamental condition that makes awareness possible, from a stone to the highest intelligence.
The baseline reality. Okay, wow. Within all this, there's also a practical path mentioned for people who really want out of the cycle, right? The great way.
Exactly. The great way, or the way to conscious immortality. It's laid out as a system of thinking and living specifically designed to allow progress without creating more destiny, more karma.
Who is this for?
For those who get genuinely, deeply dissatisfied with the whole cycle of birth, death, suffering, temporary happiness, people looking for a permanent way out of that wheel.
And what's the first step? The absolute requirement.
Honesty and truthfulness,
Yeah.
stated as completely indispensable. Without that foundation, the source suggests this path just isn't even possible.
Okay. And it involves something pretty radical. Actual physical regeneration. Changing the body.
Yes, it details a conscious process to regenerate the physical body from within. It requires intense inner focus using will and consciousness internally, and it's aided by a specific practice called regenerative breathing.
And this does what? Awakens new parts of the body.
It's said to develop dormant nerve systems, pathways that connect the doer more directly with the thinker part of the triune self.
And what's being built inside during this process?
The source talks about developing subtle internal embryonic bodies, a form body, a life body, and a light body. These grow from specific germs, lunar, solar, and light germs within the physical structure.
And these inner bodies, they develop and unite.
Eventually, yes. They're said to meet and merge within the spinal cord, then ascend, transforming the entire being.
And the end goal of all this incredibly demanding work.
The stated goal is achieving a perfect physical body that is immortal, deathless.
Wow.
This body is permanently sexless. It develops new centers of consciousness or brains in areas like the abdomen and chest linked to feeling and desire mastery, and eventually it doesn't need ordinary food anymore. It's sustained differently.
And the source links this back to older traditions, maybe hidden meanings in scriptures.
It presents its interpretation, yes, suggesting that figures and stories, like in the Gospels, for instance, were allegories describing this very path, how to regenerate the human body to conquer death. It sees this as the way to reverse the ancient fall.
That fall being when doers got entangled in the world of birth and death through misuse of feeling and desire via the sexes. So the great way is the road back to the realm of permanence.
That's exactly how it's framed. The method to restore the body and consciousness to a state of permanent, conscious existence free from the cycle.
The scope here is just vast. It's not just the individual, but the whole cosmos, even how it views things like religion.
Briefly, yeah. The universe has layers. The physical world is permeated by a form world, a life world, a light world. These exist in spheres, earth, water, air, fire, all within space.
And those elementals keep popping up. They're the basic operators everywhere.
Pretty much. The fundamental nature units doing all the work. And as we said, they become our sensations when our feeling and desire touch them. They're the agents in physical events, calamities, accidents.
And what about gods? The source had a really unusual take on the gods of religions.
Extremely unusual. It argues that the gods people worship aren't the ultimate final consciousness. Instead, they are living beings, yes, powerful, but created by humanity's collective thought.
Created by thought, like tulpas or thought forms on a massive scale.
That's the idea. God thoughts creating these beings. They have human-like traits because they're born from human minds, and they get their power from the belief and devotion directed towards them. They act as focal points, helping to exteriorize certain collective thoughts and destinies.
So, religions themselves, are they seen as necessary in this system, or?
The source suggests that, yes, despite all the different forms and potential problems, religions have been necessary. They provide moral frameworks and a focus for devotion that works for people who are mainly conscious through their senses and need that kind of external structure or personal deity.
And who provides these moral codes, if not the gods themselves?
It mentions intelligences and complete triune selves beings who have perfected themselves. They form what it calls the government of the world. They understand the law of thought and provide the ethical structures appropriate for humanity's evolution.
Okay, so we have definitely taken a deep dive into this incredibly detailed source, thinking and destiny. We've touched on the triune self, thinking as the creator of destiny, the breath form, the after-death journey, including that no new learning part, the false I versus the real I, that ultimate capital C consciousness, and even the great way towards conscious immortality. All based entirely on the system presented in this one text.
It truly is a complete self-contained worldview, a unique map of reality drawn entirely from the source you gave us.
The big takeaways for me are just the sheer power attributed to thinking, how it shapes everything, and the potential for knowing yourself beyond the everyday personality, beyond the senses, and of course this idea of a very specific, challenging path to transform your whole being.
Yeah, it leaves you with a lot to think about. Just consider that idea. thoughts as living things that must come out unless you balance them with detached duty. Or that everything physical is just thought made visible.
Or maybe this idea from the source. You can become conscious of anything you want to think about. If that's true, and if consciousness is the ultimate reality,
Hmm.
what does that imply about your own potential right here, right now, to shift your awareness and consciously connect with deeper levels of yourself and reality? That's definitely something to mull over.